Great. Thank you, Ethan. And thank you, Diana, our wonderful moderator extraordinaire, for hitting record and taking care of us. So, my name is Tom. If you have not met me before, I have worked at college as a guide now for 4 years. And my background prior to coming to CEG, as we call it, is in college admissions and college counseling. So, I really love to share my perspective from having worked behind the scenes at selective colleges and share that knowledge and wisdom with you all, students, families, counselors who are hoping to wrangle in this very chaotic process. So, and I'm also happy to be not doing it alone. I'm happy to be with Ethan, Morgan, and Diana doing this together. So, Morgan, how about you?
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. Hey, everybody. I'm Morgan Phillips. I'm the Director of College Counseling at CEG. Tom and I started right around the same time, so about 4 years with this awesome team of people. And I spend most of my time one-on-one working with students. That ranges from ninth grade through 12th grade. And so often excited at this time of year to be waiting for decisions from seniors and having kind of gone through the whole process.
Sweet. And I'm the college essay guy, and that's it. That's basically like my whole description and my whole bio. I've spent a bunch of years thinking about and writing about and working on free resources for this college application process. So the answer to will this be recorded and sent to you is yes, with some resources. You should have some auto-generated captions if you want to turn that on. And if you got questions, we've got a Q&A box to throw those into and a little live session survey form. So if you just joined us, it's in the chat. And yeah, we'd love to get to know who's here. And you know what? Let's just, for funsies, let's do a little free book giveaway. So I've got a book. It's called College Admission Essentials. We're just going to randomly choose somebody who fills out the live session survey to send the book to. So yeah, so thanks. And I'm giving you a task, Diana. I apologize, but hopefully that's cool. So in case you're interested in joining from future sessions, we've got our webinars and live events page, and you can scroll down on this page as you're seeing in this handy dandy little recording that Tom created, I think. You can basically subscribe to whichever events you want. So if you're a counselor, parent, or student, and yeah, and you just basically click that little button there, and it allows you to like add the events to your Google Calendar. You have to have a Google Calendar. So that's that. So here's what we're up to today. We're going to talk about current trends. Morgan's going to talk about that. What's going on? What are we noticing in this admission cycle? I'm going to guide you through a little something we call the readiness quiz, which is basically a way of figuring out whether you're a parent or a student, how ready are you for college, or how ready is your kid in the, is your student in the college admission process. We've even got one for counselors that we'll share. Tom's going to walk through some of the top factors that colleges look at when it comes to deciding who gets in. And we'll share a little about how we can help if you're interested in that. So without further ado, Morgan, turning it over to you.
Hey, we'll start off talking about some trends that we're seeing in college admissions. And if you read, news articles about college admissions, many of these will not be a surprise to you. There have been articles and, sort of other commentary on some of these topics in recent months. So some of the ones you'll see here are things that we see in our work with students, and we also see are kind of trending nationally. So you'll see public universities emphasizing serving in-state students. What that means is it benefits you to lean into or look at or pursue public colleges in your own state, but it can be harder as an out-of-state student to get into those public universities in other states. I live in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and so we see that a lot with UNC Chapel Hill. And the emphasis on serving in-state students is really, really prominent. We also see, sort of connected to that, this like regional shift in popularity and selectivity. And this is most notable in southern states. And so we'll see students who are sometimes seeking a warmer climate, sometimes seeking other qualities that these schools have. And it's just driving application volume up at some of those schools, which changes, the acceptance rate and makes it a bit harder to get in at times. We also see political values influencing college list development, and we are not going to talk about our own politics here tonight. But I think that if you think about your own, that if you're a parent or what you value for your child, it's easy to kind of think about certain parts of the country where you'd be more excited to send your child based on that belief set that you follow. We also talk a lot with our counseling team at CEG about evidence-based admissions. And so when your file is being read, when your application is being read, it's looking for things that connect you either to the university or to programs that they offer. We also talk about fit to major, which is another way of saying if you tell me you want to major in English, that I see evidence in your application somewhere that you are a good fit for English and that your major choice is well aligned with your overall profile. And so that's something that, depending on the age you are in high school, it looks like we've got sort of a mixture of mostly juniors and sophomores in this group. It's something to think about now in terms of the courses you take and your extracurriculars, is how can you make sure that the story you'll be telling when you apply has a cohesive thread to it. And then we also see, and this is actually probably not a new trend, it's maybe an ongoing trend for the past 10 or 20 years even, is these application volume increases, especially in early action and early decision. So when a college is taking upwards of 40, 50, even 60% of its incoming class through these application types, it means it's so much harder to get in regular decision. And that's just a very simple strategy to think about. Applying early can give you a more generous acceptance rate. So that's definitely a trend to pay attention to. And then three other ones we wanted to highlight just a little bit more. And again, these are things, if you're paying attention to the college admissions world, these will not be tremendously surprising to you, but they're nuanced and I think important to pay attention to. With standardized testing, we're seeing these shifts of policies in the post-COVID era. So we had a few years where test optional was, all the rage, and you could apply to college almost anywhere without any testing. And now we're seeing a sort of gradual shift back to more of the highly selective schools and a smattering of others requiring testing. And this is really what sets students up for the question, how do you know if you should test and when to report or withhold scores? And those questions seem easy in a way, like sort of at surface level, if you're thinking, well, I'll look at the middle 50% of testing and sort of see how mine compares to that. But we know that there's lots of chatter out there about the impact of scores and when you should and should not submit, and it does vary by school. So that's a good topic to really pay attention to and look at specifics by your scores and your profiles. I do think that there are students who can say at the outset of this process, I don't believe in testing. I don't believe it, measures my worth in a way that I want to be evaluated for college admissions, and just not test at all. And there are plenty of schools for you to apply to. Where this becomes a bit more tricky is the most highly selective schools in the country. And that's why it kind of gets so much, press or media. With AI, and I think we're just thinking about this as broadly as you want to. We know this is a new tool. Well, maybe not that new, but we know it's something that can be used in different ways. And we know that admission officers, AOs, are more aware that students have access to it and may be using it. And so you can see the quote here from an admission dean on our podcast saying, yeah, we can tell when it's ChatGPT. And as somebody who reads applications for a scholarship organization, I would say that I've had that sense as well. There's a certain style and flow to some pieces when ChatGPT has helped you write it. We'd obviously encourage you to be aware of this, pay attention to it. But I think the most important thing for me, from my college counseling lens, is that your essays sound like authentically you. And I actually think this generation has the added burden of trying to not sound like you might have had too much help from ChatGPT. And I know that might be counterintuitive. I know there's ways to use these for other, like brainstorming and other things that can be really healthy and useful. But I think you want to make sure with your writing that you're not risking possibly sounding too artificial in your text. And then identity-based prompts. This is also, Tom and I were chatting about this earlier today. We saw this addition of these community or diversity-oriented prompts on the heels of COVID as well, and then on the heels of the Supreme Court decision following that. So colleges were more asking in greater numbers about your lived experiences and wanting to know, based on your unique background, what would you bring to the campus community? And what we're seeing a little bit is a little bit of thinking that colleges still care about this, but some of those questions are changing or shifting a little bit. And that landscape and just sort of thinking about how you address your identity in college applications, I think has become more personal. Something to think really closely about is how you want to represent yourself. Because we still think colleges care about diverse perspectives and identities, we think that answering these questions in a way that's most authentic to you is the way to go. But that certainly means lots of different things for different people. So those are a few trends to watch, and I'm sure that you're aware of them, but I think now as you're getting closer to the process of applying, it's a good time to start to pay attention a little bit more to how they affect you in your applications.
Awesome. Thanks. I'll take over screen sharing. So one of the things before we get into um, talking about what are the things colleges are looking for, I want to share with you just a little assessment tool that'll sort of give you a like big picture view of where do you stand in terms of your readiness to apply. So I'm going to share my screen and show you one, and Diana's going to share in the link, um, in the link in the chat. She's going to share a link to three versions of this. So there's the student version, there's the parent version, and then there's the counselor version. They all ask a similar set of questions. But whether you're student, parent, or counselor, I want you to click on the one for you because we're going to work through this together. It's only going to take us a few minutes, and then we're going to kind of talk about some of these different aspects, and which ones are the most important, as it were. So I'm going to work through the student version here. What this is, let me just give you the big picture. These are some of the elements that we believe are important for the college admission process. So it starts with knowing what are your goals and your core values when it comes to this process. Like, what are you looking for and why? Then there are all these sort of elements, the practicals of applying to college. These are some of them, some of the big ones. And then also like what does support look like? This one actually here is not supposed to be my parents' caretakers, that's under support. It's supposed to be you. So this is a question about self, like how are you practicing self-care in the process? But that's sort of like the big picture. And what I'd love for y'all to do is just in the chat, take a look. You'll see the link for student, parent, or counselor. So go ahead and click that now, and then go to the bottom here and click next. So let's walk through these together. So, because this will also probably lead to some good questions here. So first question is, when it comes to your core values, how clear are you on these? If you're not at all clear or not sure what they are, maybe you're at this end, 0, 1, 2. If you're like, yeah, I know my core values, I'm aware of them and they drive the decisions I make, then maybe you're at like 8 to 10. If you want to put a couple notes in here about why you'd give it the score, go ahead. But for now, just, pick a number. We don't have it set up yet so that we can like live see everybody's. That would be cool. Maybe that's next time. All right. When you've got this, oh, I have to answer this one. So I'm going to answer it as my 17-year-old self. I think I was like level 6 out of 10 clear when I was a 17-year-old. Okay. Goals. How would you rate your clarity on your goals for the college admission process and the extent to which the goals are SMART, which is to say specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound? Now, that might take you a little time to think about. So if you want, you could just ask yourself, well, how clear am I on my goals for the college admission process? And it's interesting. I love like talking to students about this one because sometimes the goal is like, I want to get into a school where I'm going to feel supported, where I'm going to feel pushed but not shoved. I want to go somewhere that matches my values. Other times people are like, I want to get into Stanford and that's my goal. And I'll say that the danger in like setting your goal as a particular school, especially one that's highly rejective, is that it really narrows what success looks like. So a related question to this is thinking about what does success look like for you in this process? Is it just getting into like one or a very small set of particular schools, or could it be something a little bit bigger? So, how clear was I for my goals? I wanted to get out of Florida, where I was living. I wanted to study theater, and I wanted to go somewhere where I was surrounded by lots of nerds. So, really smart people. Now, how clear is that? I don't know. That's like level 5 clear. Maybe it's level 6. I'll be generous with myself. High school course planning. So, how would you rate your ability to pick, your high school courses to take based on what colleges are interested in seeing? And if you're not sure what colleges want to see, maybe you're down here. Tom's going to share a little bit more about that in a bit. And if you have up-to-date knowledge on what different colleges want and you feel confident, picking for best fit courses, then you're maybe up here. All right. Some of you are moving ahead, which is great. Oh, I got to pick one. In high school, I think I was like probably more like this. All right, extracurriculars and summers. How would you rate your knowledge of how colleges view extracurricular and summer opportunities and your ability to choose experiences based on your values and your college admission goals? So at the lower end, if you're not quite sure, if you're really good, you know what's available, what's out there, how to pick meaningful activities, maybe you're at the higher end. I think 17-year-old me was probably Yeah, I was more like here. I really didn't know what was out there. I was kind of like, I guess I'm working this summer, and that was kind of it. College list building. How would you rate your knowledge of colleges, what they offer in terms of majors and program offerings, and your ability to discover your preferences and develop a balanced college list? So again, if you're on the lower end, I'm not sure where to start. I have no idea. Or I am a walking encyclopedia of college knowledge, and I've visited lots and lots of schools. This is probably high for students, but let's say you visited tons of schools. Where do you land? I was like more like a two. I knew about the state schools, and I had been to Boston University. So that was it. All right. We're almost through standardized testing. How would you rate your ability to create your standardized testing plan and understand how your test scores might impact your admission and scholarship process? So you can kind of see this is like a before test, right? Before Tom jumps in here. So I don't even know what's required. 0 to 2, all the way to, oh, I got this locked down. Maybe you've even got a score that you love and you're like, I'm set. Maybe you're at 8 to 10. I had almost no clue about standardized testing. I knew that I had to take a test and that was about it. So I would give myself a 1. Personal statement. How would you rate your ability to write your personal statement or confidence that you have support? I don't even know what they're looking for. 0, 1, 2, 8 to 10. I've got a super clear sense of what they're looking for. My knowledge is current. I feel confident in my ability to find an uncommon topic and support to complete an awesome personal statement on time. For this, I was probably like a 4 because I was a decent writer. I didn't really know what colleges wanted. Maybe I'll give myself a 5 because I had some intuitive sense that worked out okay. But I didn't have any support. Okay, application and supplemental essays. What about your ability to complete all the additional essays that colleges require and how colleges evaluate these parts? So I don't even know what's required, 0 to 1 or 2, versus 8 to 10. I've got a clear sense of what admission officers want. Now, by the way, I should have mentioned this at the start, but filling out this form, you'll get this back and it'll give you a cool little diagram that'll show you kind of where you stand in these different areas and it'll give you a sense of, what you're looking for, what you need to work on. So, how would you rate your ability to complete the additional application elements? As a 17-year-old, I didn't know what was required at all. I think I was probably pretty capable. I didn't know what they wanted in supplemental essays. I think I was probably at the lower end here as a 17-year-old. Recommendation letters. What about your understanding of the importance of rec letters and how best to acquire them? 0 to 1, I don't even know what goes in a great one. 8 to 10, I really know what colleges want, and I've got a really good, clear sense of how to get a strong letter of rec. I think I was at a 4, probably for this. I knew I needed one. I knew that there were a couple teachers that I was going to look for, but I didn't prepare them at all to write a great letter. I was just like hoping that they would write a great letter. Paying for college. How would you rate your ability to make an informed decision when it comes to paying? Like what your family can contribute, financial aid that's out there. If you don't know it all, maybe you're at the lower end, 0, 1, 2. Maybe you know the basics, 2, 3, 4. Maybe you've heard of some scholarships. You know about the FAFSA and CSS. Or maybe you're like really on top of this. You've got someone in your family who's really on top of this, and you've got a real up-to-date sense of it. I had probably level 2. I knew the basics, but I didn't really know what was out there. I didn't really know where I could apply, actually. 2 more. In terms of your support, how would you rate the degree to which your parents, caregivers are aligned on all the college admission components? So if you feel like we are really aligned, like what my parents want and what I want are really on the same page, yep, I'm feeling like they're really supported, like we're great. And if you're not sure that you're aligned or you're definitely not aligned, maybe it's down here. For my parents, we were somewhat aligned. Like they wanted me to go to a good school. They were pretty, actually, maybe more like a 7. They were really supportive. They didn't really help me with the process or anything, but we were kind of on the same page. And last one, how would you rate the degree to which your family has a support system to guide you through the college admission process? Maybe you're not sure, 0, 1. You've got a college counselor. You've got a good relationship with your college counselor. And then at the high end, you meet regularly with your college counselor and you feel seen and heard, connected to them. I had a college counselor, but my engagement was minimal because it was a public school. She had a lot of students. So I would put this probably at 4, maybe a 3. Okay. So when you hit this next button, put your name, your email address, and who you are, and you hit submit, it's going to send you a little report that's going to basically be, hey, here's what you said. So you'll have this little PDF as a reference point. And probably you've got some questions. So if you've got questions that pop up, feel free to throw them into the Q&A. But now I'm going to kick it over to Tom to give you some advice on what our college is looking for when it comes to all these different factors.
Awesome. Thanks, Ethan. So if your answers were 0 to 1 for pretty much all of Ethan's categories, you're going to walk away from this next section with a lot more knowledge about what all of these things mean. So if you haven't been to one of our sessions at College Essay Guy in a while, or ever, welcome. This is a piece of data and information that we use pretty extensively in our work, just as a way to kind of help orient and ground students and families around what actually makes a difference in the admission process. So what this is a synthesis of about 185 different colleges that submitted responses to a poll that is sent out by NACAC, also known as the National Association for College Admission Counseling. So think about NACAC as kind of like it's the broader umbrella professional development organization that represents both the high school side, so counselors who work in high schools like your own, as well as admission offices, colleges, right? So NACAC sends out data and reports all the time to its members, and this is meant to give the public a sense of what actually makes a difference in the admission process. What do different colleges consider things to be considerably important when they're making decisions on one file versus another? And as you can see from this data, the last time that this was collected was in the fall of 2023. But when you look at year-to-year trends, there's usually not too much of a difference in terms of like where these categories are placed, with a big asterisk for standardized testing, which you will see kind of towards the bottom end of this spectrum. You can kind of see it at 4.9% of schools marking it considerably important. In 2023, that may have been the case because of how many schools, as Morgan mentioned, were kind of ubiquitously going test optional. But we're now entering an era. I imagine if we were to do this poll this year, you'd see that number creep up a little bit based on schools that are returning to testing being a more heavy-handed part of their process. It's not a landslide, and I want to really ground us in like the reality of the numbers. It tends to be more regionally focused towards the South and or more highly rejective, what we call them, colleges. Those colleges with the less than 10% acceptance rates. That is another way to think about it, is they reject 90% of people. Sometimes even just flipping that phrasing makes you think a little bit differently about what that means. But essentially, as you can see, a big part of kind of getting your foot in the door to have the most college options out there for you is to focus on your grades and courses. So I'm going to spend a decent amount of time talking about that. But essentially, the rest of the next half of this webinar is going to be walking through these different components and just giving you some big macro level advice, because you're all coming from different high schools and states and different areas of familiarity with the college process. But we want you to leave this webinar with some really good practical advice about, okay, take this into your own backyard, to your own school with your whatever courses or curriculum is available to you, and make some informed decisions. And maybe you might decide that, after this webinar, maybe you had some ideas about, for example, if you're a junior, or even, we saw a lot of sophomores on this call too. Maybe you had an idea of what types of classes, for example, you wanted to take for junior or senior year. Maybe after this webinar, you may change a little bit of your perspective, or you'll solidify what you came in with already. The most important thing, though, is to think about when it comes to these factors, some of these are going to be more pertinent and relevant to students depending on their class year, right? Some of these things that you see on here, for example, if you are a rising senior, there's not as much shifting of your course choices that you can have other than your senior year classes, which you have, a few months to decide on, right? Other students, for example, if you're a 9th or 10th grader, you have maybe more time to think about, how do you want to spend your time in high school? What types of extracurriculars do I want to get involved in? By the time you're a rising senior, you're usually kind of involved in, what you're involved in at that point. You can always shift at any point, but My advice here is to really focus on what you can control at the stage that you're at, rather than pinching yourself for not taking advantage of this opportunity or this thing, and focusing on what's actually going to move the needle and make a difference on your file accordingly. Okay, one thing that the NACAC report does not talk about, which is a really important part of the college process, particularly if you have your sights set on more selective colleges, is a term called institutional priorities. So Pomona, the college that I worked at, had, when I was working there, it had about a 7% acceptance rate. So again, we rejected 93% of well-qualified students. We did an assessment of the applicant pool each year, and about 80% of the students were deemed academically admissible based on their grades and course choices, right? So schools that are so privileged with a very talented applicant pool can be really choosy with who they are going to admit, right? So if this reality is a part of your particular admission process, this is where I'd say working with a counselor and having conversations with your school counselor, maybe someone, like someone from our team, is really beneficial, because there's often a lot of thought and intention behind how can I maybe maximize my college options and choose schools where I might be a more competitive candidate based on maybe a place where my state is a benefit to that college. If you come from places like where I am in California or New York, your state probably isn't that rare, but there are certain things that colleges want when you think about it, kind of like supply and demand, when they're constructing and building a class behind the scenes. Many of these things are not part of your control, and colleges are not always super transparent about like, hey, we want more kids in medieval studies, or we want more kids from Idaho, right? A lot of it depends on their own data, their own mission, vision, and values. Sometimes it's as arbitrary as, who their college's leadership is, and, whether or not they want more students from their own state that they hail from. But just know that these kind of less controllable factors are still a part of the process at these more selective schools. So to not be mindful of that, I'd say, is doing yourself a disservice. So the more you can make yourself aware of whether or not you do have a potential hook or institutional priority for a school, the more informed your college list and process can be. Okay, but focusing on what we can control is academics. And this, again, as I said before, is the foot in the door to be a competitive candidate at the widest range of colleges and universities. If you take anything away from this webinar in terms of practical advice, my advice to you is to try as much as you can to take English, math, social studies, science, and a language course as many years of high school as possible. You all are coming from different states. Some of you are coming from different countries even, and you may have different requirements based on your state graduation diploma, what it takes to graduate from wherever state you're coming from. At most states, some of these requirements might be, hey, we want you to see you take 3 years of science. We want to see you take 3 years of math. To give yourself the widest range of colleges that are going to actually consider your candidacy and have a conversation thoughtfully about whether or not you should be admitted, this is the most streamlined thing you can do to improve your chances. And not only taking all 4 of these classes all 4 years, there is a little bit of wiggle room, right? You will see, for example, some colleges do not require, for example, you to have 4 years of a foreign language to be a competitive applicant. I would say when I was working at Pomona, again, we had a very talented, academically talented pool. Most of the students who were applying did have all of these, what we call solid academic courses for all 4 years of high school, or maybe they doubled up 1 year. So they didn't have social studies all 4 years, but they took 2 as their junior year. So that way their schedule was freed up as a senior to take double up in math and science, right? 4 years collectively of full years of these courses is going to give you the best benefit. And this is just a little bit of data from school websites themselves, some popular names that lots of students come to the college process with an awareness of some of these more selective schools. This just gives you a sense of how many years of some of these courses they recommend. And you actually might even be surprised to see that even more schools recommend 4 years of language as they do social studies, which kind of surprised me actually as a former history major. But nonetheless, I would still want to give myself that 33% chance and go for the 4 years to be a more competitive candidate in all of these categories if it's at all possible for you. So something to think about. Beyond the college prep classes, those 5 big buckets that I mentioned, some of you are coming from schools where you have things like theater, requirements to graduate, or, an art requirement. There are certain schools like the University of California system that actually ask all students to come in with an art requirement. So, it's good to have a sense of your college list as a rising junior before you select your courses for next year, just in case you do need to add in a summer course in the arts or something to make sure that your door is open for some of the schools and their academic requirements. What's most important, I would say, by and large, at the widest range of colleges and universities are those core solid academic courses, but you still don't want to be someone coming in with like C's in gym. That's not really a good look, even if you're not necessarily going to be majoring in anything physiological. You still do want to try to do as well as you can academically across the board. Sometimes some of these non-solid academic courses, things that are more pre-professional. So say maybe your school has a unique engineering class or a business class, and that aligns, as Morgan was mentioning, with an evidence-based admission process and alignment with some of the majors and programs that you're saying in your application. Hey, I want to study and pursue this particular thing to make these big changes in society. If you have some alignment in terms of these courses and they can support and augment your process, great. But I would caution you against having things like, these courses replace the core solid academic courses. Another practical example of that, say you're interested in medicine and you have taken biology and chemistry, but you haven't taken physics and it wasn't required from your high school. And you're like, hey, my school offers anatomy and that's way more in line with medicine, so I'm going to take anatomy instead. At some schools, that may be fine, but at the majority of colleges, they probably want to see those core solid science classes, biology, chemistry, and physics, ahead of seeing anatomy. Anatomy would be a great added bonus if you have room, but not in lieu of that core solid academic course. So hopefully that distinction makes sense. Now, I haven't looked at the Q&A because I've been moving on slides, but I imagine there's lots of questions around strength of curriculum and, hey, but at my school, we only have these courses offered and I can't take them until you're a senior. There is a lot of awareness on the college admission officers' end of the spectrum of these particular school particularities. Their jobs is to become experts in the schools and the regions that they read applications for. So many colleges practice what's called territory management, meaning that they read files for different geographic parts of the country and sometimes the world. So for me, for example, when I worked in admissions at Pomona, I had files from California, but I also was a territory manager for Washington and Oregon. So for all the students who were applying from high schools from those states, it was my job to be aware of, for example, the dual enrollment program in Washington State is called Running Start. So you'd see a lot of Running Start courses on students' transcripts, but not all high schools in Washington offer that. Some high schools were IB schools, International Baccalaureate Diploma. Some had advanced placement classes. Some had none of those options. In fact, I worked at a high school that had no AP or IB classes. The teachers themselves designed their own advanced curriculum that was beyond the standard classes. So the two questions that you want to think about when you are putting forward your candidacy is, and this is what an admission officer is going to be asking themselves, is what was available to me and what did I leave on the table? So if, for example, your school has 20 advanced placement classes and you're applying to a bunch of selective colleges, they would expect you to be taking a pretty solid amount of those courses. Many of you may be coming from schools where you have things like Naviance or Maya Learning or SCORE. Those are kind of like application management platforms that many high schools give to their families and students to have more data and grounding on your own school's particularities. Because it can be very tempting to go to things like Reddit or College Confidential or asking any random person on the internet, hey, what are my stats? These are, how many A's I have, and this is how many AP classes I have. But it's kind of apples and oranges. It really is rooted in your own individual high school context. So even the student who's coming from a school down the street, even if they have more advanced placement classes offered at their school, that's not really relevant to your process because the admission officer is not dinging you for not taking classes that you did not have access to. They are asking themselves, what did you take advantage of that you had available to you? And if you have anything that you're like, hey, gee, the admission officer reading this, they may wonder why I didn't take AP history when I'm saying, I'm really interested in social sciences. Maybe why didn't I take these classes? You may want to use your application, such as your additional information section or other clarifying spaces in an application to contextualize that. Maybe also your counselor or your teachers can contextualize that in their recommendation letters. So lots of things to keep in mind when it comes to academics, but two big questions to ask yourself is what was available to me and what did I leave on the table or not take advantage of? And does that require any explanation on my end to the admission team who might not know otherwise? Okay. So beyond academics, if you look at that survey report of what's most considerably important to colleges, the next category immediately beyond courses and grades is something called positive character attributes. And you may have saw that line and we're like, well, what does that mean? Like, there are a lot of things that could be considered positive. So we did a little bit of homework at College Essay Guide to help equip you with some practical tools. And we looked at a bunch of different mission statements and vision statements and value statements to give you 5 handy, what we call admission nutrients that create for a healthy college application. Cue the beautifully balanced plate on the left side of the slides. The idea is that majority of colleges in their foundational documents, in their webinars, in their videos that they have around themselves, have explicitly said in some way, shape, or form, maybe they use a slightly different term for this, but these are 5 categories that appeared the most frequently across a wide range of colleges and universities. So when you're thinking about, for example, your essays, which is I'm about to pass the mic on to Ethan to talk a little bit more about this. These are 5 qualities that ideally you are showcasing in some intentional way across your application opportunities. They do not need to be, first of all, they're not a requirement to be admitted to college. These are just 5 general buckets and guides and some some guiding questions that you see under each term that an admission officer may likely be asking themselves for evidence of as they're moving through your application. So they're going to be looking at your rec letters for this. They'll be looking at your activities list and how you spent your time outside of classes. They'll be looking for evidence of intellectual curiosity. What are you curious around? How have you explored a particular academic topic beyond just showing up to class, right? So the more evidence I'd say you have of these 5 qualities across your application, you're doing yourself a large service in this process by being intentional about how they show up. Ethan, essays being one main way that happens.
Thanks. That was great. Okay, so first let's talk about your personal statement. So your personal statement, big picture, is what people call the college essay. They call it the personal essay. It's about a page. And the goal here is to demonstrate skills, qualities, values that you're going to bring to a college campus, to show them that you're going to be a contributing member. It's going to be fun hanging out with you, and maybe includes some of these qualities, which you'll see at the bottom of the page, which is like your core values, like what are the things you care about, insight, which is to say stuff that isn't already obvious from elsewhere in your application, maybe something element of it that's like personal, and ideally that's something that's somewhat uncommon. And is your essay clear? Is it clearly gone through several drafts? Is it intentional? We call this sometimes craft. Now, some of the things that students sometimes think about when they're trying to pick their topic is like they'll ask questions like, are any topics off limits? And I don't say that you like 100% can't write about a certain thing, but I'll say that I would steer clear of extremely common topics, which are often things like common extracurricular activities like, basketball, football, volleyball, common instruments, piano, violin, flute, common, marching band, debate. These tend to just be, you have to write the best marching band essay ever in order to stand out. There's also a category of topics that I would call like potentially stigmatized topics. So if you're writing about things that people might have a judgment about, like a pop culture figure, they might be like, oh, that's kind of superficial, or video games. Wait, that's a waste of time, or whatever the judgment is about that. And you could write about these things. It's just a little bit harder to do well. So you kind of want to proceed with caution. And then there's like a category of what I would call potentially polarizing topics, which is like politics or religion or things like that. And if there's like a whole strategy around doing that, but the basics of that strategy is to focus on core values, things that are universal, secular, other people can kind of get on board with despite what their beliefs are about a particular thing. So 2 things to think about, and this is not a college essay session, but 2 things to sort of like plant seeds for you for later when we'll do more webinars about this. One is like, can you find a topic that's somewhat elastic, which is to say stretchy enough to talk about lots of different sides of you? And ideally something that is uncommon in some way. So that doesn't need to mean it needs to be like the weirdest thing ever, like you're writing about medieval blacksmithing. Although if you do medieval blacksmithing, you should maybe consider writing about it. But is there some way that you take whatever your topic is and turn it into something that would be, putting your own spin on it? And there are lots of ways to do that. The final one that I'll say, actually, so there's kind of a third one here, is like, can you hopefully weave in some of these admission nutrients that Tom just talked about? So can you demonstrate commitment to service, intellectual curiosity, show your initiative? So finding a topic that's elastic, uncommon in some way, and that somehow weaves in some nutrients, that's the sweet spot. All right, but that's not the only essay you need to write, because they have, especially at selective schools, these things called supplemental essays. And they're somewhere between 100 and 300 words, and they're usually specifically about what the college is looking for, probably connected to some institutional priorities, as Tom talked about earlier. And they might be like, let's say, a school that really cares about, um, alignment to major. So they might have a why major essay. Or maybe they're a school that's really cares about, students getting along well. And so they might ask you about differing viewpoints or diversity in communities. You can kind of get a sense of what the school vibe is like and what they care about from your supplemental essays. They will number anywhere from zero. Some schools have zero supplemental essays. Some schools have like 8 supplemental essays. So it's going to be a big range, and it's probably going to take you longer than you think. You'll probably, once you create your college list, if you're applying to selective schools, end up writing somewhere between, I don't know, 5 to 30 essays. What? 30 essays? Yes. You don't have to necessarily, you can reuse these, which will be a subject of a future webinar. But chances are, and by the way, if you're wondering when should I even be starting on these, probably the time where you want to begin thinking about these. It's not a bad time to start thinking about them now, so you can sort of, maybe that influences your summer a little bit. But the time you want to really start in earnest writing those is probably the summertime, so that you're done, hopefully, with a big chunk of your essay writing by the time you go back to school in the fall. So those are some things about supplemental essays. Morgan, over to you for demonstrated interest.
All right. Okay, hey everybody. Okay, so what we just heard, I think, from Tom and Ethan might make you feel like there's like an intellectual component. Some of this is like writing essays is complex and can be challenging. What I'm going to talk about now in terms of what colleges are looking for is going to be brief, but it's going to be a little bit more tactical, practical. And if you're in ninth or 10th grade and you're looking for something like easy to do, so you can tell your parents you did something and you feel like you're moving the needle, these are the next 2 slides are for you. So demonstrated interest is a way that you can show colleges that you might be interested, like that your interest might be genuine. And the opposite of this is what sometimes we talk about being a stealth applicant. So back in my day, when I applied to colleges in the 90s, you could just apply and it was okay if they had never heard from you before, and things were a bit more equal. In this day and age, colleges are tracking you sometimes through emails they send to you, links that you might click on to see if you're engaging with what they send to you to gauge your level of interest. And so at its worst, this can feel like a game where you have a personal assistant or maybe a helpful parent clicking on links for you and hovering over websites to track time. But I think at its best, this is really a way for colleges to try to gauge if they admit you, are you likely to say yes and to enroll? And that's how colleges kind of manage the business side of their work. So you can see a few examples here of ways that you can show interest, visiting campuses. Of course, that's good for you, and it's good if the college is tracking it as well. And engaging with representatives from the school if they're visiting your local area, and a few of the other sort of examples that you can see on this slide. On the next slide, you're going to see an example of a common data set grid. And so for any college, you could just Google, this one's for Bates College Common Data Set, literally any college. And the way that this is reported shows you in this section, which is C7, the weight that they put on interest. So once you have your college list, let's say it's 10 colleges, you could look this up for each school and have a college list spreadsheet that has a category for demonstrated interest, where you either indicate if it's very important, or you can say yes or no if it matters. And then for you as a student, that will inform your actions. So it will tell you, like, should I visit campus? Should I pursue an interview? Should I open all of their emails? And I think this is like, as you start to get a lot of mail or email from colleges, it can be kind of overwhelming and feel like a lot of spam. I think the task for you, especially in sophomore year and junior year, is to try to weed out the ones where you know you're not interested, and so that the colleges you feel like you will be applying to, that's the cohort that you're really going through the motions to understand if they value your interest and if they're tracking it. There are colleges that don't track campus visits, and there are colleges that don't consider your interest, because you can imagine if everybody told a college they were interested, then everybody would start telling them that, and it wouldn't have any meaning. So there's lots of sort of pieces here, but I think the basic point I want to make is, once you start to figure out where you want to apply and what schools you might be interested in, when they send you emails, open them. And sort of a minimum, joining the mailing list on their website is a great thing to do. That's like easy and gets you in the mix of their like awareness and their radar. All right, so two more slides here from me on recommendations. When we again think about what our college is looking for. They're looking for ways to get to know you. They're looking for reasons to like you and find you appealing and want to select you to be a part of their community. For recommendation letters, that can come in two main forms. One is the counselor recommendation. This typically is from the high school guidance counselor, college counselor, school counselor, who will write as sort of a secondary source of information. So I was a high school counselor for, oh, I don't know, 13, 14 years. And in that role, I'm writing letters to colleges to show the best qualities of my students. So this is the advocacy piece. And so I'm looking for what are the absolute best qualities of this person. It helps the more you know them, right? Even just a little bit that they have familiarity with you and know how you spend your time. So the counsel letter can really help the admissions office see what are your best qualities, what strengths will you bring to their college community, and to put you in context of the overall high school. So again, for students who are sophomores or juniors, and not to say if in ninth grade it's not a good use of your time, but you've got more time on your side. If you're a sophomore or junior, it's the kind of time where it's like make a point to say hi to your counselor, meet your counselor, and do things that can help them get to know you a little bit early on. And then the other form of recommendation that's most common is the teacher recommendation letter. Most colleges, as you can see on point number 3 here, most selective colleges ask for 2 teacher letters. And the most important thing about teacher letters for US colleges and universities is a narrow sort of scope of the teacher letter focusing on your academic everything academic that they've observed. And so that includes your work ethic, your attitude, your performance in class, your strengths and skills in that area that they've taught you in. So it's really what have they observed you doing, and not for them to talk about your extracurriculars and read your resume and then describe that, unless they have coached you on in some way outside of the classroom and had that direct experience. So we really want this to be a primary source from a teacher who knows you reasonably well and can speak to your academic qualities. So that's the focus here. All right, I think I'm going to pass it on now. All right.
Yes, I'm bringing it home in terms of our content before passing it off to Ethan to share with you a little special offer for webinar attendees. So speaking of the resume, obviously a big part of the college admission process that gets a lot of buzz, particularly again for those more selective schools, is your extracurricular profile, right? So especially when, at so many of these schools, most students are academically admissible or could be, great academic fits for the school. That's when the college or university is going to go to the other ways that you make an impact on your community and other ways that you show initiative beyond just checking off boxes and taking classes, or just, maybe just being a member of clubs and organizations that already exist in your school. If you do have your sights set on more selective colleges, which many people who come to college as a guy do, because those are usually the ones that ask for lots of different essays. You want to focus, I'd say, channel and kind of hone your energy towards 3 to 4 main core activities. So for some of you, maybe that's you're a 2-sport athlete, and then maybe you're involved in something that's on the more academic end, and then maybe you're involved in a service club. That would be a pretty normal and competitive resume when it comes to deep achievements that take up a lot of your time. Now, again, the more highly selective the schools that you're looking at, generally, the more there might be pressure to take or be involved in activities that are higher in scale. If you are doing service work or tutoring work, students who are going to be more competitive might be ones that don't just do tutoring at the high school or the elementary school down the street, but maybe are scaling that up and bringing together all these different high schools to have this statewide initiative that's really making waves, right? And is getting recognized in the newspaper. That would be an example of a really exemplary level of initiative and impact related to a cause or a population or an interest that you're really excited about. So my biggest piece of advice with extracurriculars is to, again, just like with classes, take advantage of what is available in your high school. Start as younger students, start dabbling and kind of really refining your time so that way you're not stretched so thin across 10 different extracurriculars, but you're not really able to deeply engage with them. Colleges really do want to see depth of involvement. They ideally would love to see some evidence of leadership. Doesn't have to be that you have a formal position or title, but they do want to see that there is some effort and investment on your part of expanding your reach beyond your school walls. And then lastly, we talked a little bit about standardized testing already, so I'm not going to harp on this too long. But this just gives you a brief rundown of the timeline that Morgan mentioned earlier. And this is an area that gets lots of buzz and anxiety and lots of attention online. But I really want to remind those of you who are attending that the vast majority of colleges that are out there still are test optional. Some are even test free, meaning that they don't even look at your test scores at all. The University of California is an example of that. So definitely a great idea to, especially if you have historically been a strong test taker, this can be an additional benefit to your candidacy if you can prepare adequately and do well on it. But don't feel like this needs to be the end all be all of your process. And there are some nuanced particularities of should you submit or should you not submit based on, looking at, for example, some acceptance rate disparities at some colleges between submitters of scores and those who do not submit scores. Is there a big gap in terms of acceptance rate? Sometimes that's not always causation. That could just be, correlation of strong academic students overall. But this is one of those areas where, just like with demonstrated interest, it's a good idea to get kind of granular with the colleges on your list and look into a little bit more of the data on their standardized testing policy, how it's evolved, and how it may impact different students differently depending on admissibility. And then this is really brief, just AP scores. You're probably going to ask a lot of questions about it, and you can very much do that in the Q&A if you have any particularities. But just know that they're actually not that big of a deal in the admission process, even at the more selective schools. So I want to de-escalate your time and energy where necessary.
Thank you. I love it. So what do we have at CG? We've got tons and tons of free resources. We've got webinars, like I shared at the start, that you can find out about just by, basically just adding it to your calendar if you want. Usually we do 2 a month. We've got our family handbook for college admission, which is kind of like a 30-page overarching guide to all the things. And if you just basically Google, and I think more and more, if you look in AI on anything related to college admissions and add college essay guide, you'll find some link connected to it. We do lots of courses. There's a course coming up that Tom's going to teach on applying to highly selectives. These are all pay what you can courses, which means that if you're a student from a low income household and you'd like to join, we'd love to have you. Just fill out the pay what you can form. I've got courses coming up this summer on writing your personal statement and, writing your supplemental essays. And then we also do one-on-one support. So if you're looking for help on the college essay process or college counseling, if you're like trying to plan, hey, what am I doing this summer? We do that. And we've got an awesome program called the Matchlighters Scholars Program, where we pair students for 10 hours of free one-on-one support. You have to be qualified for that as a low-income student. When it comes to college counseling, we help on all the aspects of it, from creating an awesome college list of schools that you love to figuring out, should I apply early action, early decision? What are my potential hooks? Do I know what they are? Can we, figure out what that looks like, for me? Standardized testing recommendations, when to take, should you retake, how to set up your, teachers and counselors for great recommendation letters, specific advice like Morgan is giving on demonstrated interest, and lots more. The reason I think we're awesome is that we have tons and tons of college knowledge. This is that spreadsheet that Tom mentioned. We did all the research of what colleges are looking for. So this is one of many, I would call them like behind the scenes spreadsheets. We spent a lot of time thinking about this and nerding out on it. We've also got a ton of experience. Our team is, former admission officers and folks who've made this their, career. And for all of us, we feel really passionate or like fortunate that we've turned our passion, the thing that we love, into our full-time jobs. So I think we feel really lucky in that regard. And we've got a lot of specific exercise that we've developed. So this is one called the iceberg exercise that Tom developed, where it helps you get deeper into what is the thing really beneath the thing. Like, why is it that you're involved in whatever it is, volleyball? And what are those specific, connections that you can make to it that end up showing qualities that colleges are interested in, like things like collaboration, and how do those manifest in your application and your activities list. So we'd love to work with you if you're interested. We've got a fun, like Tom mentioned, a little offer. You get $250 off any one-on-one package with this coupon code called Snapshot. And like I said, we do essay and application support for 11th and 12th graders, and then college counseling support for 9th through 12th graders. And like I said, if you can't afford, you're like, I can't afford one-on-one counseling, don't worry. We've got our awesome Matchlighters program, and we've got tons of amazing counselors who would love to work with you. We've got our Matchlighters program works with hundreds of students each year. So feel free to apply at that link, and we'll share these links in the chat. So it's time for Q&A, and I want to kick it off. I think close to the start, Ed asked a really great question, which is about the 2023 Supreme Court ruling, which banned the explicit use of race as a factor in admissions. And then universities redesigned their essay prompts to let students discuss their backgrounds or identity. That's a separate spreadsheet I have that maps out all the supplemental essay prompts. And I did a really comprehensive thing on this in terms of how many actually changed. My sense over the last couple of years is that this trend will continue for reasons, political and, institutional. And Ed asked, what is the main question behind these prompts? My sense is that colleges want to enroll a community of students that is going to be working together in amazing ways, and they're looking for bridge builders. And you'll see some, even NYU asked specifically about bridge builders. And so what they're looking for is what are the different ways, what are the different things that you have done in your world, in your community? Where are you coming from? And how have you been a collaborator? How have you worked with others to solve problems, to make amazing things happen in your community? And so that's one quality that I would see. Another one is like initiative. I think these essays can be a great opportunity to talk about how you took initiative, either in a particular conversation or with a particular group or in your school or in your community, and connecting that back to specific examples of your background or identity. If your identity is important to you, and I'm using identity broadly here, we have lots of exercises for this that we'll share in the coming weeks and months. But write about it. Find a way to write about it, connect it to specific qualities, these quote unquote positive character attributes, and show colleges how this aspect of your identity will contribute to the college campus. And I've got a really comprehensive guide that I will share with you. I actually already shared it. I shared it in response to one of Ed's comments above. All right, other ones. When does the Matchlighters program begin? And by the way, Morgan and Tom, I know you're typing answers to those questions, but if either of you wants to unmute and share anything that, like, with the whole group, feel free right after I answer Deborah's question. When does the Matchlighters program begin? So it starts it's for rising seniors. So students right now who are like finishing their junior year, it's for them. We usually open it in March or April. If you're on our email list, you'll get a notice about that. So yeah. All right. Are there these, Tom or Morgan, that you want to? Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say there's a few, since I'm sharing the slides, I can't actually like search for links and copy them on my browser, but I just want to let those of you who have questions, especially on any of the topics that we presented on, know that like if you Google whatever your question is plus college essay guy, like something will come up. I could bet money on that right now. Especially if it's related to college admissions. If it's not and you're trying to like best me, then good luck. But we have a really, really robust portfolio of lots of different free resources with lots of different medium too. So we have podcasts, episodes on pretty much every aspect of the college planning process, not exclusively essays, less building, financial aid, scholarship support, international student support, transfer students. It can get really niche and granular as well. And then there were a couple of questions early on about AI, and I just want to reiterate that a phrase that you may have heard us say, I don't think we actually said it too frequently, but it's a really common one in the college admission landscape. And it's not always that fun to hear it, but it's called "it depends." And it really speaks to how, unlike, some of you may be maybe you were born in a different country or you attended college somewhere else, like someone just mentioned Canadian colleges, for example. Outside the US, most countries' process is a little more streamlined and direct. The US has a lot of freedom of choice and variability, which is in many ways a blessing to customize and kind of create the education that you have, those goals that you set on the college readiness quiz. You can really kind of be really tailored and specific about the type of educational journey you can work towards. But with that also comes a lot of ambiguity and a lack of clarity from school to school, because what may be important for one college may be completely irrelevant and not looked at all for another school. We tried to kind of cover the biggest baseline. But with things like AI, for example, it's super evolving. It's very new. Some colleges like Virginia Tech are saying, hey, we're actually using this actively in our process to screen essays. Others like Brown have a very scary anti-AI, language on their website being like any use of AI at all is like prohibited strictly. And then there are schools like Caltech that are like, here are ways you can use AI to research colleges. So again, I know it's tempting to want to get the straight answer about every school that's on your list, but without knowing you and your list and your goals, we can only put out those caveats like it depends and encourage you to do your own individual research. And if you're using things like ChatGPT, don't just take what it says at face value, actually click the source links because many college websites are not very kept up to date and require that own critical thinking that we beautifully have in our brains.
Yeah, I want to tag onto that and say that like I think the question is not should I use AI or not? It's like what are you using AI to do? And if, for instance, you're using AI to find awesome schools and to like broaden your thinking about what a great fit school could look like, that seems like a really good use. I wouldn't use it to I wouldn't copy paste language in the application. I think that's going to be flagged, pretty easily. I think that when it comes to writing your college essay, you're kind of like, I was thinking about this last night. I don't know what I was watching. I was watching something on Netflix and I was like, oh, you're kind of like slicing a piece of your soul off. And that's kind of what you end up doing as you go through this process. And I was like, the thing about AI slop, which is to say like AI that looks just like, what even am I reading? And it makes my brain tired. It doesn't have that, it kind of feels soulless. It doesn't have that messiness and that sort of personality and that like, imperfections. And so, yeah, if you're like, what is he even talking about? We've got tons of examples on the site, but I would say I want to just encourage you to, Tom's sister says it this way, and I really love it. It's give yourself the privilege and the benefit and the space of having a writing process when it comes to your essay, because you're going to grow and learn a whole bunch about yourself through this process. And I would say avoid shortcuts in the sense of like sort of just copying and pasting. Um, yeah, I mean, you imagine I said I'm the college essay guy, but I just want to encourage y'all to like make time for it. Speaking of nutrients, there are tons of nutrients that you'll gain just from going through that process. I think that also there's an aspect of it where there's stuff that you learn about yourself um, through that process, but yeah, I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it. I think that the things that we end up losing by not giving ourselves that process ending up costing us more in the long run. So yeah, that's where I stand. Well, thanks, friends. Thanks for being here. And thanks for hanging out with us. We'll be back soon with another webinar. We're going to post this one on YouTube. So if you go to our YouTube channel, smash that like button. No, I'm kidding. Please feel free to you can post comments underneath that and we will answer them. And thanks again for being here. Thanks, Morgan and Tom. You're the best. Heart emojis.
Thank you.
Appreciate y'all and see you on the next one.